You have been systematically conditioned to believe that your voice carries zero weight. You have been manipulated into thinking that your genuine emotions are merely theatrical drama and that your fundamental value is entirely up for negotiation. They have successfully planted the toxic lie in your mind that you are the sole architect of the chaos. That is a fabrication. The actual problem is the invisible game being played against you, and you have been bleeding out because you do not know the rules. You are not going to learn how to be more accommodating or understanding. You are going to learn how to become completely and utterly uncontrollable. A manipulator does not operate on logic. They are parasitic entities that feed exclusively on your emotional energy, your desperation to explain yourself, your tears, and your explosive anger. That is their premium fuel source. Every single time you react to their calculated provocations, you are voluntarily handing over the remote control to your nervous system. You are actively funding their delusion of omnipotence. To defeat them, you must understand that your emotional output is the only currency they value. The most radical, terrifying act of power you can execute is to violently sever that supply line. Strategic silence is not an act of cowardly submission. It is a calculated, brutal emotional strike. When they launch a psychological offensive expecting a chaotic explosion, and instead crash into an impenetrable wall of dead, flat calm, their power evaporates instantly. They are left swinging at empty air. You must eradicate the drama and shut down the spectacle entirely. When you deny them the reaction they desperately crave, their entire operational matrix is starved of oxygen. A manipulator deprived of emotional supply is like an engine running without oil. It rapidly overheats and completely collapses. Your silence starves the parasite. To a narcissistic manipulator, your personal boundaries are not lines of respect. They are perceived as direct, intolerable insults to their innate sense of absolute entitlement. They have been deeply conditioned by your past behavior to expect immediate surrender. Therefore, the word no, delivered with cold precision and zero justification, becomes a weapon of mass psychological destruction. You must permanently delete phrases like "I can't" because from your vocabulary. You must state a flat, uncompromising no. This is not the opening bid in a negotiation. It is a final, sovereign decree. You do not require clearance from anyone to fiercely protect your time, your energetic reserves, or your mental sanctuary. Understand this biological truth. Every single time you offer a pathetic apology for enforcing a standard, you bleed authority. You signal weakness to a predator. A rigid, unyielding no is the ultimate declaration that your internal sovereignty is not up for debate. It is the titanium door slamming shut on their access to your reality. The manipulator is a master angler, and manufacturing artificial conflict is their primary trade. They do not engage in honest communication. They deploy calculated strikes, the sarcastic remark, the venomous criticism camouflaged as a joke, the subtle insult designed to bypass your rational defenses. These are not accidents. They are precision-engineered traps. Every single one of these tactics is a piece of poisoned bait cast into your waters, specifically designed to see if you are foolish enough to bite. The moment you rush to defend your character or erupt in justified anger, the hook is set. You have been successfully reeled back into their chaotic domain, dancing perfectly to their orchestrated rhythm. The strategy of the apex predator is to coldly observe the bait floating in the water, correctly identify it as a pathetic, desperate grasp for control, and consciously refuse to engage. Your absolute, unshakable calm in the face of their venom is the ultimate proof that their toxins can no longer penetrate your armor. You neutralize the poison through non-participation. The manipulator's most profound, terrifying nightmare is not that you harbor deep hatred for them. It is that you perceive them as entirely, fundamentally irrelevant. Their fragile ego demands that they remain the absolute center of gravity in your psychological universe, whether they are playing the role of the savior or the tormentor. The most devastating maneuver you can execute is to prove, through relentless action, that your trajectory, your ambitions, and your fulfillment are accelerating rapidly with or without their presence. You must aggressively pursue your objectives, build your network, and dominate your environment. You do not do this to perform for them. You do it because your life's mission dwarfs their pathetic need for drama. When they are forced to witness you expanding and thriving in the absolute void of their absence, the foundational myth of their absence. Self-importance is violently shattered. You do not defeat them by fighting. You annihilate them by outgrowing them so significantly that they become a microscopic footnote in your history. The manipulator operates from a highly detailed, rigid script. They possess a comprehensive map of your triggers. They know the exact sequence of words required to manufacture your guilt, and the precise actions needed to ignite your rage. They rely on your predictable compliance to maintain their dominion. Your immediate objective is to systematically tear that script to shreds. You must introduce terrifying unpredictability into the system. Where you previously offered tears, you now present an impenetrable void of emotion. Where you once screamed in frustration, you now deploy deafening silence. Where you once begged for basic decency, you now coldly turn your back and walk away. By behaving in ways they cannot anticipate or compute, you transform into a complex puzzle they are fundamentally unequipped to solve. Their meticulously crafted manual for controlling you becomes utterly useless garbage. Your newfound eerie calm is the undeniable evidence of their complete failure. You are exhausting your vital life force, fighting unwinnable wars on their chosen battleground. You are perpetually hunting for a sense of justice or validation that simply does not exist in their psychological architecture. You operate under the fatal delusion that if you can just formulate the perfect, airtight logical argument, their empathy will suddenly activate. It never will. You must wake up to the reality that the casino is rigged against you. The only guaranteed method to avoid losing a rigged game is to permanently refuse to play. Executing a disciplined retreat from the chaos is not a display of weakness. It is a high-level tactical victory. It is the ultimate declaration of self-worth. You value the sanctity of your mental peace so intensely that you absolutely refuse to squander it in a conflict devoid of any real prize. Terminating the call, walking out of the room, or permanently exiting the dynamic is not surrender. It is the definitive checkmate. Extreme emotions, whether they manifest as burning hatred or desperate love, act as heavy steel chains binding you to the manipulator. As long as they can trigger an intense feeling within you, they retain access to your internal system. Indifference, however, is a terrifying, consuming void. It represents the total and absolute eradication of their power over your reality. True indifference cannot be faked or artificially performed. It must be methodically constructed through the ruthless redirection of your focus toward your own evolution. You must become so consumed with your own forward momentum that their opinions, their games, and their very existence genuinely cease to register on your radar. When they attempt to lock eyes with you and find absolutely nothing, no residual pain, no lingering anger, no desperate affection, but only lie. A cold, neutral abyss. They are forced to confront the chilling reality that they have been completely erased from your system. They understand, with absolute certainty, that the war is over and they have lost. Every defensive tactic we have discussed is fundamentally useless unless you simultaneously construct an impenetrable fortress within your own mind. You cannot merely defend, you must build. This requires the aggressive reclamation of the territory you surrendered. You must reignite your dormant passions, reconnect with the allies you discarded, and heavily invest capital into your own biological and intellectual expansion. You must engineer a life of such staggering density and fulfillment that the manipulator's eventual absence does not feel like a terrifying void, but rather a profound, expanding space of tranquility. Your objective on this planet was never to rehabilitate a broken parasite. Your singular, uncompromising mission is to rescue yourself from the wreckage. You must architect an internal ecosystem so structurally sound, so deeply rooted in self-respect, that no external entity possesses the leverage to ever collapse it again. You are building an empire where they do not even have a passport. The final trap the manipulator sets is the illusion of closure. You remain chained to them because you are desperately waiting for an apology that will never arrive, or an explanation that will finally make the abuse make sense. You must accept that expecting a rational, empathetic conclusion from a disordered mind is a biological impossibility. The closure you are seeking is a myth designed to keep you engaged in the cycle. You must violently sever the desire for their final word. True closure is not something they grant you. It is a sovereign declaration you make to yourself. It is the brutal acceptance that the disrespect you endured was all the closure you ever needed to justify your permanent departure. When you stop waiting for them to validate your pain, you instantly reclaim the keys to your own psychological prison. By annihilating the need for their narrative resolution, you starve them of their final piece of leverage. You close the book yourself, lock it, and burn it. You no longer require their participation to understand your past, which means you no longer require their existence to dictate your future. The ultimate evolutionary leap in this process is realizing that the entire battle was never actually about them. The manipulator was merely a brutal mirror reflecting your own internal deficits and your dangerous willingness to tolerate disrespect. The war was always against your own low standards and your biological urge to seek safety in familiar toxicity. When you finally enforce these codes of absolute power, a profound paradigm shift occurs. You transition from a defensive posture of trying to survive their attacks to an offensive posture of total self-dominance. You realize that your value is an immutable law of physics, not a variable dependent on their flawed perception. The pinnacle of this transformation is achieving a state of cold, unshakeable self-reverence. You respect yourself so deeply and fiercely that the mere thought of allowing anyone to drain your energy becomes physically repulsive. You have not just defeated the manipulator, you have transcended the entire frequency on which they operate. You have become untouchable. Authentic respect is never a request. It is a physical reality that you embody and enforce. You will never secure it by negotiating your boundaries or amplifying your submission. Absolute power is only achieved when your internal discipline, your rigid parameters, and your mental sanctuary become completely non-negotiable. The strategic architecture is brutal but effective. Starve their emotional supply line, fortify your perimeter with absolute refusals, and obsess over your own mission until their entire existence is rendered meaningless. The ultimate victory is not forcing a manipulator to recognize your worth. The true, lasting triumph is elevating your own self-respect to such a staggering height that their pathetic opinion is permanently eradicated from your reality. That is the definition of true, sovereign freedom. If you are prepared to burn their rulebook and begin constructing your impenetrable fortress, subscribe and strike the bell. Solidify your declaration of independence in the comments right now by typing, "My peace is non-negotiable."